When communities work together, when hosts and refugees work together, they lift up an entire community. We as the UN Refugee Agency, we want to be able to focus on hope and what can happen when refugees are given the tools, they're able to move, they're able to work, they're able to send their kids to school. It's this sort of story that I think that has a benefit not just for the refugees, but for those that are hosting them.
Do you think more needs to be done for refugees in Europe, and if so, what?
Is that we all need to do more in terms of sharing responsibility, sharing the responsibility with some of those hosts that have hosted refugees for decades, and to be able to have as an international community strong solidarity with refugees certainly, but also with those communities that have been hosting refugees for decades.
You were in Greece in 2018 in June. A lot has been done even since you were last there, but there are still reports of overcrowding in the camps in Moria where you were on Lesbos. What do you think could be done more to help people in camps in Greece on the island still, and what should be done?
Well, clearly the strong support from the Greek government is important. There, much smaller numbers of people are actually crossing and going into Greece than in the period, for example, of 2015, 2016, even 17. So this is manageable. And we, from the UN Refugee Agency, think it's also very strongly important that not just a couple of countries within the European Union have the responsibility to host on a long-term basis. The chances, for example, for people to relocate to other European Union countries is very important. So you need to have a managed system across the region, as opposed to the responsibility falling on just a couple or three countries in a disproportionate way. Mm-hmm. So this is very important.
I know that the theme of women is very close to your heart. What kinds of programs should the UNHCR have in place to protect female refugees in camps? In particular, I've heard reports in Moria that some women wear nappies at night to avoid having to go out of their tents to go to the toilet, for instance. So what's being done to protect women in particular?
Not just infrastructure in some of the facilities in some of the camps or settlements to make sure that there's lighting available, that local authorities can intervene quickly when things go wrong, but that you have a very strong focus on prevention. This is something that has always been part of our own focus and attention, trying to prevent issues related to sexual and gender-based violence, for example, and to be able to help through psychosocial support, counseling, and other services. And again, we rely very much on national authorities and countries in terms of those systems and social services systems that may be in place.
We're reading so many horrific accounts of what's going on in Libya at the moment: torture, sexual violence, widespread rape. The UNHCR is present on the ground in Libya, although probably relatively limited, I would think. But what's being done at the moment to try and protect migrants and refugees who are going through Libya or waiting in Libya in the hope that they at some point can cross the Mediterranean, and what should be done?
The situation is very difficult, as you've alluded to, inside the country. We've worked with the Libyan government, but also others, including some very generous countries like Niger, who have allowed us to collaborate with the International Organization for Migration to be able to take those in need of international protection. UNHCR has been able to use the good facilities of Niger to be able to find onward locations and resettlement spots for those that we are able to access in detention facilities inside Libya. But the access is limited. And the resettlement spaces are also limited. So our message is, in fact, we need to increase the number of opportunities where we can actually bring people out and move them through much more quickly through Niger to other locations in order for the system to work.
You talked about resettlement earlier, particularly from Niger. It's one of the main programs from the UNHCR. Why do you think some Western countries are not so keen to resettle refugees?
Sometimes I think it's perhaps a lack of understanding in terms of what those that are seeking resettlement may need. What we're seeing is actually an increase in countries participating. which is interesting because although, you know, worldwide we estimate in 2019 that there are 1.4 million refugees that are in need of this form of international protection. It's very special, and it affects a very small number of people, the most vulnerable of the vulnerable. But last year we were only able to find 55,000, a little bit over 55,000 out of, you know, over 1 million resettlement spaces. So clearly we need to have more countries step forward and say we will take the most vulnerable of the vulnerable. But a lot of this is a matter of communication, you know, in terms of the program that we've adapted, how we've identified people. But we also see that there's more interest at the country level and more nations getting involved. So we're hopeful.
I know from reading about you how much you enjoy being in the field.
I love it.
Yeah. I had assumed as someone so high up in the UN that you wouldn't get to go out at all, but you seem to be out all the time. Why do you think field work is so important?
I don't think I'm out all the time, but when I do go, I have a hard time being quiet about it, so maybe that's the impression that I leave you with. Listen, I can't do my job sitting behind a desk and pushing paper, or relying on conversations from others who might be in the field, even though those are very rich indeed. I have to be attached somehow to the people that we have on our team that are serving others, you know, the people of UNHCR and our partners. But I also have to have those direct conversations and experiences with refugees and the displaced, because that's how we get a much better idea of how we can do our jobs better, how we can better serve and support, how we can put the agency back into refugees so that they are making decisions on their own lives and we're not making those on their behalves. So that kind of field connection for me, it's reinvigorating, it's energizing, and it's my favorite part of the job.